Hello, hi, welcome once again to M5's English language learning program, Let's Speak English. I'm Gav Duncan and I'm here on your TV to help you learn English. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Yes? Good. And are you ready for today's lesson? Yes? Good. Okay, well let's learn English together. And hello again. Welcome, 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 and welcome. How are you all today? Is everyone having a good time? Yes? Well, that's great. And are you all ready for today's lesson? You know what this week is all about, don't you? Yes, that's right. This week is a mini revision week. All this week we're going to be looking back at some of the things we've seen in weeks 56 to 59. So, if you're all ready, then we can get started. I spoke to Ivan earlier and he assured me that the animals were prepared for the lesson. They know the drill and they're going to do what we want them to do. So, that's that taken care of. Now, all we need to do is check that you're all ready. Have you got a cup of something to drink? Yes? Check. Have you been to the toilet? Yes? Check. Are you sitting down in a comfortable chair or on a comfortable sofa? Yes? Check. Okay then, let's get stuck in. It's day 4 of the mini revision. Let's go. Now, this is the bit of vocabulary that I wanted to clarify. It's an acronym. Do you all remember when Enid told you about acronyms? Things like DOMS and NATO. Acronyms are words which we make from the initial letters of other words. We use the initial letters to make a shorter word. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is a big mouthful, so normally we just say OECD. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization? NATO. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration? Far too much of a mouthful. NASA. Okay, well, just like those, DIY is an acronym, but the initials stand for Do It Yourself. The original idea came from the 1950s, when a lot of people didn't have enough money to pay someone to come to their house and do jobs. Jobs like decorating, or maybe plastering a wall, or building a wall, or fixing a door. There are lots of possibilities. So, if someone didn't have enough money to pay for a tradesman, a painter and decorator, or a plasterer, or a builder, or bricklayer, or a carpenter, then they bought the tools and materials they needed to complete the job, and then they did the job. They didn't pay a tradesman, a professional, because they didn't have enough money, so they did the job themselves. DIY, do it yourself. Okay, so that's all I wanted to tell you about that. I just wanted to make sure that nobody was too confused by that last acronym. Nowadays, lots of people prefer to do jobs around the house themselves, and as a result you get large DIY superstores. There's a large one in Hungary which is named after a character from the film Star Wars. Maybe George Lucas likes DIY too, I don't know. Anyway, that's enough of that for now. Now it's time to get back to what we were looking at a couple of lessons ago. Think back, think back. Who remembers what we were looking at? I know, you all do. We were looking at the idea of enough, weren't we? That's right, we were looking at enough and the difference between when we use it with a noun and when we use it with an adjective. You do remember, don't you? Okay, I'll believe you. Thousands wouldn't, but just to be on the safe side, just to make sure, let's quickly run over the differences, shall we? When we use enough with a noun, then we use the form of enough plus noun. We've got enough money to buy bread, butter, salami and cheese. Do you have enough time to finish the report this afternoon? Is there enough sugar in your coffee? So, as we can see in those 3 sentences, we used enough with 3 different nouns. And because we were using enough with nouns, we put enough in front of the noun, enough money, enough time, and enough sugar. Good. Now, One thing that was different in those examples is that in two of the sentences, we used enough with a question, didn't we? We didn't see this the other day, did we? No, but this isn't very difficult. It's not hard to handle. We can cope with this, no problem. Now, what happens to a sentence in English when we change it into a question? Who remembers? Yes, of course, you all do. When we make a question in English, the word order changes, doesn't it? If we make a positive statement in English, then the word order is subject plus verb plus object. I like pizza. But when we make a question in English, then the word order changes. With a question, we start with an auxiliary verb and then follow with the subject. Do you like pizza? Are you waiting for the number 74 bus? If we're using a question word, then when we make the question, we start with the question word and then follow with the auxiliary verb and the subject. What do you want for dinner? When are they going on holiday? Okay, so far so good, no? Yes, we've all seen this before and, well, it's not rocket science, is it? Okay, so now let's see what we did when we made a question using the word enough. Let's have another closer look at the two questions we saw earlier. Do you have enough time to finish the report this afternoon? Is there enough sugar in your coffee? Okay, so let's have a look at the first question first. Do you have enough time? Blah, blah, blah. Well, is there anything difficult about this question? No. It's a question in the present simple tense, using have to talk about possession, which means that we're using the verb to do as the auxiliary verb. In the present simple, we use the verb to do, correctly conjugated, as an auxiliary verb when we make negatives and ask questions. The only place where we have to be a little bit careful is where? Yes, that's right. We have to pay attention to the third person singular form. That's where the verb to do changes form. Do becomes does. So if we want to ask the same question, but this time not about the second person singular, but about the third person singular, then we have to make sure that we change do to does. Does she have enough time? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, no problems there. Change do to the correct form for the third person singular and then follow, as usual, with the subject, she, the main verb, have, and the object, time. The only difference in the question is the fact that we're also using enough in the question. But that's not a problem, is it? No. We know that when we want to use enough with a noun, we place enough first and follow it with the noun. And that's what we do here. We start the question using the auxiliary verb do, or does for the third person, then follow the auxiliary verb with the subject. I, you, Alfredo, Loretta, Doreen, the Benchfields, or Christiane from the ferry. And then we add the main verb in the infinitive and follow with the rest of the sentence. Have enough time. Enough goes before the noun, just like normal. Okay, so let's have a look at the other question, the one about the sugar and the coffee. Well, this time we're asking a question using the present simple form of the verb to be. Now this is slightly different because the verb to be doesn't use an auxiliary verb in the present simple or the past simple tenses. So all that means is that we start with the correct form of the verb to be. In this case, is the third person singular. We're talking about sugar, which is the third person singular. So all we do is change the positive sentence, there is enough sugar in your coffee, into a question by changing the position of the verb. We move the correct form of the verb to be, is, to the front of the sentence, and we follow with the rest. This time, also using enough and making sure that because we're using enough with a noun, we follow enough with the noun. Enough sugar, not sugar enough. Simple. Okay, so what about the other situation? What about when we use enough with adjectives, not nouns? Well, as I'm sure you all remember, when we use enough with an adjective, then we place the adjective first and follow it with enough. So in the sentences, Chongi is good enough to play football for the first team, Balint isn't old enough to start school. Bense isn't strong enough to open the jar. Nandi isn't tall enough to see over the wall. We can see that we follow the four adjectives, good, old, strong and tall, with enough. It's adjective plus enough, not the other way around. Okay, and what about you asking questions with the adjective plus enough form? Well, what do you think? Yes, that's right. We do the same as we did with the enough plus noun form. We make the question and then add the adjective followed by enough, like this. Is Chongi good enough to play football for the first team? Is Balint old enough to start school? Is Bense strong enough to open the jar? Is Nandi tall enough to see over the wall? So, how did we turn those sentences into questions? Well, we took the correct form of the verb to be, and in all of these examples we used the third person singular, which means that we need is. And we started the sentence with is. The verb comes before the subject. In positive sentences, we follow the pattern of subject plus verb plus object. But in questions, we change the positions of the subject and the verb. It becomes verb plus subject. Now, did you all note that in the original examples we used the negative form? I'm sure you did, and it's not a problem, is it? No. All we had to do, as you can all see, is add the word not. That word we always see when we're making a negative sentence to the verb. He is becomes he is not. And because we all prefer the abbreviated version, because we all like the short version more, we abbreviated is not to isn't. Simple. Okay, time for some practice. Have a look at the following sentences and complete them so that enough is in the right place. Before the noun, if the sentence is using a noun, and after the adjective, if the sentence uses an adjective. As usual, let's do the first one together, okay? Balint won't be a sumo wrestler, but he be not fat enough. Balint wants to be a sumo wrestler, but he's not fat enough. Okay. So, that was pretty easy, wasn't it? We can see that the first thing we have to change is the verb to want. We're talking about Balint, which means that we're using the third person singular. The verb to want is regular, which means that we have to add an s to the end of the infinitive to make the correct third person singular form. I want, you want, but he, she, and it wants. Okay, so far, so good. Next, we have to deal with the fact that there's another verb in the sentence. We often see this, especially after verbs like the verb to want. We often follow the verb want with another verb in the to infinitive form. This shows us what we want or what we would like. When I grow up, I want to be a policeman, just like T.J. Hooker. When I get to the airport, I want to have a nice, cool, refreshing drink. Okay, so we know what Balint wants. He wants to be a sumo wrestler. Great, but there's a problem. Sumo wrestlers are fat. Really, really fat. Look at the guy on the right of this photo. So, we know that this part of the sentence is negative. We're talking about the fact that Balint is too slim. He's too thin. He doesn't weigh 300 kilos. So that means that he's not fat enough. And we're talking about Balint using the present simple form of the verb to be, which means that we have to conjugate the verb. He is. And when we add the negative, the word not, to the equation, then we get he's not. Also, we're using the word enough with an adjective, which means that we place the adjective before enough. Right then, let's put all of that together, shall we? Balint wants to be a sumo wrestler, but he's not fat enough. And that's it. Yes, our time for the day is up. We've used up our 15 minutes and it's time for us to turn the lights off and go home. So, I hope you enjoyed this lesson in the mini revision, and I hope that the rest of your afternoon and evening are going to be great. No, better than great. Fantastic! Remember, if you need more English, you can always pop over to www.m5tv.hu and check out some of our old lessons, as well as the vocabulary from our lessons. So, it's time for us to go, but don't worry, we'll be back on your screens tomorrow. See you then. See you later. Bye.